Hello and welcome. My name's George. My channel is all about helping you get the most out of Logic Pro so that you can record and produce your best music in your home studio. Today we're going to be looking at the Logic Remote app, which you can download for free on both your iPad or iPhone. And this allows you to turn your iPad or iPhone into a control surface to pair with Logic Pro. I'm going to show you everything you need to know about the Logic Remote, so let's dive in. Now for starters, in order for Logic Remote to connect to Logic Pro, you need to have both your computer and your iOS device connected to the same Wi-Fi network. And you'll also want to make sure that you have Logic Remote downloaded on your iPad, and you can do that in the App Store, and it's a free download. Once you've done all that, then simply open up Logic Remote on your iPad, and you can see it's connected, and I currently have the mixer view pulled up on the Logic Remote. If you want to change to a different view, you simply go to the little arrow in the top left corner, and you'll see the drop-down list here. But let's start with the mixer, since that's probably what most people will be using this for. So at the top here, you see my list of tracks, and if I simply glide over, I can see all the tracks I have in my session just by navigating that way. And then each track has a fader for volume. Let me pull up my mixer in Logic so we can see that as well. So I have all my tracks here, and now I can control the volume with my touchscreen, and it makes it super easy to adjust things there. Now, currently, we're just seeing the volume. If you want to see the volume and pan, you can click over there, and that switches that. And then now I can adjust the pan as well. And if there's anything else in the mixer I want to see, such as the sends, I can adjust those there, as well as any audio effects. Now, for the audio effects, any effects that are based in Logic, such as the channel EQ, we can click on and then open up the plugin. And now I can actually just click and drag and change the EQ directly on my iPad. So super easy to do that. But for example, if I open up this virtual mix rack from Slate Digital, I don't get the full plugin view, but I do get the parameters that I can change that way. So I do have some control. It's just not as visually appealing as if you're using some of the built-in Logic plugins. Now, the mixer view, we can also adjust our input and output. And if we want to add any Midi effects, we can do that too here. So let's say I want to add a arpeggiator. I can do that like so. And we can open up the plugin too. And if I want to remove it, I can simply do that here too. Now let's go back to volume. Now, one of the things that I like about Logic Remote is when you're using automation, I can actually bring things up and down on faders with my finger rather than have to use the mouse, for example. So to demonstrate that, let's record a little bit of automation. So I'm going to open up my automation by hitting the letter A on my keyboard. You can see on this track, I already have some automation drawn in. So why don't I go ahead and remove all of that, and let's use the iPad to draw in that automation. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the automation mode to latch. Let's hit record and record that automation in. And now here you can see that it drew in the automation that I was controlling with the iPad. I'm going to set my automation mode back to read here. So I find that quite handy myself. Now, another situation where the Logic Remote is quite handy is when you're recording yourself. And let's say you have your setup is not right at your workstation. So perhaps you're behind a drum kit, or if you have a guitar set up somewhere else in the room or in another room completely, you can still record into Logic without having to go hit record at your computer. So one of the easy way to do this is if we switch over to the key command menu, and now you'll see we have a record, play, stop key commands. And at the top here, we have a whole bunch of other key commands as well. And we can swipe through the whole list of key commands. So right here, right at our fingertips, we have a whole bunch of different key commands that we don't have to be anywhere near our computer to take advantage of. So for example, if I set up a new audio recording and let's just go ahead and solo. I'm just going to mute that so it's not going over my speakers. And let's say I'm somewhere else, not at my workstation. I'm a few feet away. So now all I have to do is hit record from the iPad. And I can start recording into Logic Pro without being anywhere near the computer. And I can stop, for example. And if I want to record another take, simply hit record once again, and it'll create a new take for me simply by recording right over the previous take. And you can see my 2 takes in Logic there. So this makes it, as I said, super easy. You don't have to be sitting at your computer to record yourself if you have the Logic Remote installed. Now, a few of the other windows we have available to us, the smart controls. So if we're on a track that has some Logic plugins, so let's click over here, for example. Now I can actually use the Logic Remote as a MIDI controller. So now I'm playing the software instrument that I have loaded in Logic. And then you'll notice there's also these other controls up here. So I can change, the amount of drive on the fly without having to open up any of the plugins. And if I change to another track, such as my piano, and it's also velocity sensitive. So if I type the key lightly and harder, it actually responds to that. So if you're on the road and you don't have, your MIDI keyboard with you, well, then you can simply use your iPad and input notes that way. Now, the other cool thing with the smart controls, I'm just going to load up an Alchemy patch. And in Alchemy, then we have the transform pad right on the iPad. And again, this makes it really easy to be able to change the patch on the fly, and there's the tone of it on the fly. And just as we did with the volume, you can record that in as automation. So I find that a lot easier than, you can grab it with the mouse, but this way I can actually play a note and at the same time use my finger and move around the transform pad and see what kind of sounds that I come up with that way. The step sequencer is also a cool feature in the Logic Remote. So if we select that, and let's actually create a new software instrument, but with the pattern, and let's do the drum kit designer. I'll just go ahead and solo that. So now I can create a drum beat directly from my iPad here. So let's start with our kick on 1 and 3. And let me create a loop just around that. And let's press play. So anyways, so there's a cool and easy way to use your iPad to create a drum beat, right? And you can quickly experiment with the positioning of all your instruments, and it's easy to see it visually and easy to just tap in the notes to see what works and what you like. Now, similarly, when you're on a drum kit, you can also view the drum kit itself and play it that way. To me, it's a little bit more difficult than the step sequencer, but thought I'd show you that as well. Now, the other feature we have is the chord strips. And this allows us to easily trigger some chords depending on the track that you have selected. So for example, here you see some different chords here. Now, if I hit this G in different places, I'll just get different inversions of that chord. And if I go at the bottom here, I'll get the bass note, the third and the fifth. And as you saw before, the different inversions. So if you're not great at playing the keyboard and you just want to hit some chords, it can be fun to play around with. And the last thing I'll show is the live loops function. Now for this, you'll want to be in the loops view in Logic, which you can get to right here. And you can see all these different cells here. And this way you can trigger those cells with the iPad. I'm going to load up one of the live loops templates in Logic so you can see how this works. So here I've got this live loops template that's loaded up. So this is included in Logic. And this allows you just to trigger any of these clips using your iPad. So anyways, if you're someone who uses the live loops function in Logic Pro, then this can be a super fun tool to use as well. So I hope that's been helpful for you. And if you haven't already, maybe it'll encourage you to check out the Logic Remote app for yourself. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments below. And I want to thank you for all the likes and subscribes. And before you go, make sure to download my free Ultimate Logic Pro Starter Pack. This includes my Logic Pro hotkey cheat sheet, my audio recording guide, my mixing guide, my gear guide, as well as my Logic Pro session templates. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.